Well, I've covered zombie apocalypses in the past. This one isn't quite a zombie apocalypse, but you guys like me talking about zombie apocalypses, so I'm gonna stop being redundant and get on with the subject matter. This week we are discussing the perfect voice acting.
Everything's set. All we need to do is wait. It's me, Goldman.
Our Emperor shall awaken soon. Hurry, friends.
It's too quiet.
At last, you've come. Friends.
If Goldman Sachs started their own zombie apocalypse to increase their shares by 2%, if PETA had a military budget, the title literally exists because the Japanese developers slapped together a bunch of scary sounding words and then used whatever looked cool together in English. Hold your fire, insert 4 tokens to play, one of the gems of the 90s arcades, the zombies politely let you progress through an area before attacking in groups, giant chainsaws apparently only slightly damage you, all the bosses are named after tarot cards, so it must be a JoJo's reference. The definition of a keyboard warrior, this game series would be horrifying if it were real life and would make a great movie, but instead made an awful one, and for once, they aren't zombies, they are mutant clone zombie horror cliches game itself. This week, we are telling you why you wouldn't survive House of the Dead's zombie apocalypse. As we do with any why you wouldn't survive scenario, we have to discuss how and why these events occurred before blending its reality in with ours. And also, yes, they aren't actually zombies, as series director Takashi Oda has stated that the term zombie is trite and should refer to the monsters as creatures as they are copied and created. There existed an organization labeled the DBR Corporation that focused primarily on genetic research and experimentation. The forefront of the company was headed by forceful research director Dr. Kurian. As time went on though, he took his time and resources there to cure his terminally ill son Daniel. In a very similar vein to what spurred the events of Killing Floor, Dr. Kurian had developed a gene sequence that apparently bridged the gap between life and death in order to save his son. The organization had been running since as early as the 1880s with frequent funding from the wealthy Goldman family. Kurian had begun construction of a very secretive project beneath his mansion that had existed since the Middle Ages. The project sought to prevent the inevitable means of death, and the head of the financier family, Caleb Goldman, sent even more funds to have this new bioreactor up and running sooner. Caleb was an expert on genome theory and held a deep resentment towards humanity and its voracious nature. His goal was much more grand, citing that he wanted the human race to revert to their natural state. In the same regards as Resident Evil's beginnings, these experiments led to violent creatures and mutants. These lifeless evil drones had pushed away a majority of Kurian's research staff, spiraling him into a personal madness. In 1998, he started kidnapping more and more of the few remaining staff to experiment on them, and eventually, when the government agency AMS prodded into these disappearances, Kurian unleashed the army of mutants and zombies he had created, hoping to destroy the world. The AMS agents swiftly plowed through these hordes and came face to face with his ultimate creation, the Magician, who promptly killed its creator before their final battle. Because it's a video game, of course, 2 gun-wielding plot armor heroes take it out and end the outbreak. That is until Caleb Goldman scavenged the Kurian mansion to keep the Mad Doctor's research moving forward. Reutilizing these experiments, Goldman restarted a new outbreak on February 20th, 2000, in a city that his headquarters was located in, spurring yet another AMS response, but on a larger scale than before. While they combated the undead forces, Goldman had been re-engineering the Magician into a new creature known as the Emperor, so that it may reign over the world and keep humanity in line. All of these efforts were to, as Goldman famously says,
To protect the life cycle.
However, 10-year-olds on rail shooters with tons of quarters were able to defeat this all-powerful being. Seeing his plan fail and humanity prevailing, Goldman jumps off the top of his headquarters and falls to his death. Or, if you played Typing of the Dead and get the best ending, he flies away on magical farts. 3 years later, numerous agents are trying to snuff out what remains of Goldman's legacy in a European AMS agency. While plotting their next move within the building's basement, a cataclysmic earthquake rocks the foundation and traps them below. They soon discover more of the same creatures have somehow been unleashed, and that Goldman, before his death, had set a series of events to fire nuclear missiles worldwide. This Alpha team emerged from the rubble and took out many a fearsome foe before returning to Goldman's estate. They prevent prevent the launch of the missiles, but shortly after the successor to the Emperor was created and released, thusly titled the World, a Leviathan creature that would only grow larger and more fearsome every time it got closer to death. One of these agents, James, decides to kamikaze the beast so that it may not grow further and successfully destroys them both. By 2019, the ultimate goal of Goldman and Curian had been met. The world had been plunged into chaos and left everything in a post-apocalyptic state. Somewhere in a remote location in a faraway desert within the EFI research facility where these creatures were being further created, unbeknownst to many, Dr. Curian's body, as well as his still-alive son Daniel, had been transported there. While this research facility had been pumping out creatures, a group of disbanded AMS agents attempted to raid this compound to stop further production and end the apocalypse. The raid failed and killed all but the weakened Rogan, who had been saved by Daniel. Another raid team of only two, being Lisa and G, successfully vanquished the facility's toughest creatures and reached Rogan and Daniel. The mastermind behind this worldwide outbreak had been none other than Dr. Curian, who had been in a 19-year resurrection process that transformed him into the powerful Wheel of Fate. After some more heated gunplay or keyboard warrioring, depending on what you're playing, Wheel of Fate is on the verge of death, bitching about overpopulation a la Thanos, and asks for his son's forgiveness before he and Lisa destroy him once and for all. However, despite this, the epidemic was not completely taken out, and we last see the world in which they reside still taken over by the armies of undead and abominations. Now this is where we will leave off with the lore and begin to describe how things would occur in a real-life situation and what it means to me, you, your mom's boyfriend, and your mom's boyfriend's girlfriend's survival. We can easily say that isolated incidents like those that occurred at the Curian mansion would be kept under wraps and really have only affected research personnel and mansion staff. However, in House of the Dead 2, 4, and especially 3, things are a bit different. The sudden breakout of these mutants and zombie-like beings is drastic and swift. The armies of these creatures are vast and superior to anything we can face, incorporating anything from humans to animals to even plants, and the boss-level beasts that either stand as nearly indestructible slaughterhouses or demigods of unimaginable strength. Unlike atypical zombie outbreaks where a majority of the hostiles are just mindless people with a need to chomp, House of the Dead is way more similar to the clones found in Killing Floor and to a certain degree Resident Evil's Infection. A majority of House of the Dead's creatures are clones, duplicates of an original being constantly churned out in droves to overwhelm humanity as our numbers begin to dwindle. So as long as their means of production are withstanding, there will definitely be no end to them. Common humanoid clones, zombies, whatever, I'm just gonna call them whatever I want to have my vocabulary a little more expansive, so stop bitching. But the basic humanoids that you'll run into are the closest thing you will get to a zombie apocalypse. However, they can vary heavily from person to person, some only being able to bite to cause damage, while others prefer to punch, slug, or even slice you to bits with giant axes. A wide variety of these human types are proficient in deadly weaponry, or at least flinging dangerous materials at you, ranging from hammers, wrecking balls, chainsaws, blowtorches, or even going full Donkey Kong and chucking explosive barrels at you. Depending on their apparel, physique, and mutations, they can be harder to kill, and in some cases, have the sense to protect their weak points. Even humanoids infected with parasites can exist, where if shot anywhere but the head, will burst and unleash a horde of parasites onto a victim. Animals, as previously mentioned, are also utilized by this hellish army, including 28 Days Later like monkeys clinging to walls and chandeliers, large worms and leeches with sharpened teeth, bloodied owls to swoop down and peck at you voraciously, giant slugs to suck your face off, swarms of bats with a pissed off attitude and a deeper craving for blood, huge ass frogs, piranhas that will come at you like little fanged bastard missiles, vultures that don't wait for something to die to rip apart their flesh, and hordes of beetles that will cover the body and slowly eat away at your flesh. Plants can also become hybrids with humanoids, giving them vine-like whips to lash at survivors. And amongst the masses are even cyborgs, adorning reinforced armor They can also cling to walls, fire their lasers, and even teleport around at will to dodge gunfire. These abominations mostly do not require a sole headshot to be taken down, as enough damage can kill them, but most of them need to be shot in the head or heart successively and many times to take them out, but that's the boss level creatures. They do seek to devour the flesh of the living, and are seen having a not so happy meal and sloppy joe a time or two, but their bites do not cause any discernible infection or transformation into a zombie. However, the corpses of humans can reanimate after a variable amount of time, adding to their already blooming numbers. If, say, elite commandos with expertise in combat were killed by these mutants, they could come back as zombies, retaining much of their skills they had while alive, except substituting firearms for dual-wielding knives and other bladed weapons. They will attack in groups a majority of the time, attempting to overwhelm anything and everyone, as to be expected in a zombie-style pandemic. And with enough armed force and retaliation, it would be safe to say you could possibly survive through a majority of these named threats. But the true danger arises with the many bosses of House of the Dead, the first of which being Chariot, a massive behemoth in impenetrable armor that will not hesitate to cut you in half with its broadaxe. The Hanged Man being a literal Batman and not a poser rich kid. It commands troves of bats to envelop prey before it swoops down to gash them open while they are distracted. The Hermit is an overgrown spider with crab-like plating that will shoot balls of spiderwebs at you to slow you down in order to close in and eviscerate you in 8 different ways. Working as cooperatives, the judgment duo of Zeal and Kural somewhat exist symbiotically, where if one is damaged, the other will suffer similar harm. One being a headless giant knight and the other being a quick and nimble flying imp, both providing different methods to have you on your toes only to be killed by their partner while you're distracted. The Hierophant is a mossy, grotesque version of Neptune, wielding a trident to impale victims while being amphibious in nature, able to master travel on land and sea. It also commands the aforementioned piranhas to attack you and eat you alive bit by bit while it stabs you to death. The Tower is reminiscent of the fabled Hydra, with 5 heads of this serpent looking to consume you, all of which are commanded by the central blue head. Strength is a roided out giant version of Bubba Sawyer, wielding a gigantic and dirty chainsaw and axes sunken in its flesh. It is relentless in hunting down its prey, and if it is unable to reach them, will pull the axes from its flesh and yeet them to cut victims down from afar. Death is just Paul Blart supersized with a club made of the skulls of its victims, able to crush anyone with one swing, working as the front guardian of the research facility that created it. The Fool is what happens when a sloth unlocks its true killing potential, with elongated claws and teeth to rip and tear as it uses the bodies of the dead as throwable weapons to stun people long enough for an easy strike. Justice, looking like a Machamp after decades of torture, prefers to use hand-to-feet combat to commit murder. It will attempt to either grab you with the forearms of its forearms in order to rip you apart, or get close enough to drop kick you and break every bone in your body. He will even swallow active grenades whole without any repercussions. If you hate spiders, well, love comes in pairs with the lovers, a 2-pack of arachnophobia. The male spider is adorned with razor-sharp legs to gash open people, while the female will spin webs to slow people down and churn out spider babies to infest and overwhelm an individual with thousands of venomous bites. The sun is a horrible hybrid of human, animal, and plant life, able to strangle and crush foes with its vine tentacles and impale them from beneath their feet. The Empress takes a page out of the Strength's book, but with a knack for enhanced agility and a big-ass chainsaw that can separate into 2 separate chainsaws. Temperance is basically a 50-foot boomer with some added thickness. So thick, in fact, that most, if not any firepower, do no harm to it in any degree, requiring excessive blunt force to the head to take it out. And these are just the weaker variety. At the center of each of these apocalyptic scenarios are infinitely powerful beings with unworldly abilities. The pinnacle of Dr. Curian's work, the Magician, flies around at blazing fast speeds, teleports in unpredictable manners, and hurls balls of scorching hot fire. It displays cunning behavior and underhanded tactics as it killed his creator in order to reign over the world by itself, meaning these creations could not be controlled. It would be further upgraded and worked upon with each subsequent outbreak, always being able to reanimate and attempt to enact its revenge. To build upon and expand Dr. Kirian's vision, Goldman sought out the creation of the Emperor, a translucent demigod surrounded by multiple orbs that will deflect gunfire, morph into a blade for it to wield, or transform into a weakened form of one of 4 bosses to fight for it. It will go invisible when it has sustained too much damage in order to flee, and is a bitch to kill. Dr. Kirian had resurrected himself as the Wheel of Fate, standing as a tall metal Terminator-esque Adonis, able to wield electricity, use telekinesis, and protect itself with its namesake wheel. In Japanime-like fashion, the star serves to execute anyone who may enter the epicenter of the outbreak, using his katanas to cut down people to size, using his aura to launch energy attacks, and spin in a whirlwind to create a tornado that will slice and dice those nearby. And at the cusp of these beasts resides the world, a demonic ice-like giant of a demon, creating iced hatchets, dragons, and icicles to kill anyone that opposes it. If it were to be defeated in combat, it would simply grow twice in size, until eventually breaks from its icy exoskeleton into a full-standing fire-riddled leviathan. It required a well-placed suicidal explosion to be defeated, but it is very possible that if it were to grow enough, that it would be indestructible. Regarding the fact that their bases of operations are usually heavily guarded by bosses or are in very remote and discreet locations, it would take coordinated strikes by governments and militaries to quell this epidemic, and it would have to happen near the beginning of these occurrences. As the mad scientist Dr. Kirian was able to resurrect himself over time, and would easily be able to construct a whole nother bioreactor. Constantly churning out these deadly clones without any needed resources makes for a formidable army that can go out and seize control. If they are able to take down large organizations like these before they can execute airstrikes or nuclear attacks, it's safe to say we as basic people wouldn't stand a chance, especially with beings like the world. The whole purpose of their creation was to wipe out humanity in the first place and create the world's most powerful beings.
And we succeeded.
We aren't secret agents with combat training, infinite supplies of ammunition, and aren't getting any extra lives for performing altruistic actions. Hell, most of us accidentally shoot the people that are being attacked. Attempting to fight back would show some results, but the variety of enemy types would have you cornered out of ammo, exhausted, and desperate to find any kind of safe haven, as they can invade any safe haven with ease due to their means of transportation and strength. Some are even able to teleport to their desired locations in case you were trying to bunker down in a fallout shelter. Their impossible numbers and the ungodly amount of variety and powers in their ranks would be our ultimate downfall. The bosses, and especially the world, could easily vanquish anything that stood before them if given enough time. Resistances and bands of the living would try and keep humanity alive and fight back, while constantly targeting these bioengineering centers. But without vast firepower, they would consistently fail, die, and just become elite mutants for the House of the Dead to puppet around. Even dying against them would just aid their efforts. It's a dim, dying hope if allowed to flourish. What seemed like a simple, basic zombie attack becomes a Resident Evil nightmare with never-ending results. The dreams of Dr. Kirian and Mr. Goldman would be achieved, and the apparent life cycle would be protected as humanity breathed its last breath. Well, that about closes the deal on this global real estate venture. Was this too convoluted, or did I not go over the survival aspect of this scenario well enough? Covering arcade games is a first for the channel, and if I missed out on any information or you want to add to the discussion, comment below. I didn't discuss Scarlet Dawn as it was already overflowing with creature types and lore, but if you like what you heard and saw, leave a like and sub to the channel for more zombie, survival, and other fun content. If you're financially inclined, feel free to donate in a number of ways to be featured here, from being a badass tank supporter, to a Patreon patron, a member of the channel through the YouTube join button, or simply donating during my live streams. Coming up soon, I'll be attempting a multi-part Why You Wouldn't Survive series on the SCP-Keter, however you pronounce it, the SCP-Keter class, so stay tuned for that, and if you've got time, check out some of my other Why You Wouldn't Survive scenarios. There are over 30 to explore now. Until next time, I'm Zackass, aka Wow Such Gaming. Never forget to stay wow.